Good afternoon. Thank you for coming online with us as we continue to present tribute to Leon Fleisher, brought to you by his many students and disciples. Today we're honored to remember again the legendary pianist, musician, teacher, mentor, and a friend. Leon Fleischer was a man who most generously shared himself with people around him. He meant and he gave so much to music and to musicians of our time. Please welcome on our virtual stage Leon Fleischer's students. They bring musical offerings, they speak about their teacher, as we all pay homage to this incredible man and pledge to carry on his legacy of humility, resilience, and dedication. We appreciate your patience. If the artists may experience challenges with connecting, we will do our best to bring the beauty of each presentation to you at its fullest. And now I would like to welcome on our virtual stage Yael Weiss. Yael, welcome. This is a great honor to have you. And I will leave the stage to you.
Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, it's been exactly 1 week since Mr. Fleischer's passing. And the thing about it is that it still seems impossible. Leon Fleischer is everywhere. Every time I touch the piano, every time I speak with one of his students, every time I think of Beethoven or Schubert or Brahms, he's there. I first met Mr. Fleischer when I was 12 years old in Israel. I played for him in a masterclass in Jerusalem, and that 1 hour spent together with him and with Mozart's D minor piano concerto changed everything. I had the opportunity to play for many master teachers at the time, but even though I barely spoke English and we could only communicate through sound and gestures, I felt that I absolutely had to work with him when I grew up. There was something so powerful and inspiring at that initial meeting that I never forgot. And at the age of 17, I finally had the opportunity to come to the US, to Baltimore, and to study with him. The first year as a very young person in a new country was not easy. And even though Fleischer's focus with us, his students, was always the music, the composers, and the musical message, I think he was also very aware of who we were as individuals. Even though he usually left the individual story aside. So I was quite astonished when, during that first year, when come November, as a newcomer, I didn't even know what Thanksgiving was. I didn't understand why everybody left the Peabody dormitory and why the cafeteria was closed. Somehow, Mr. Fleischer sensed that. And he invited me to Thanksgiving at his house. My very first Thanksgiving ever was with Mr. Fleischer, with his wife, Kathy, and with wonderful stories and just a very deep sense of gratitude. I'm going to play Chopin's so-called cello etude, which is a piece I remember bringing to one of his lessons. And this is one where I have the score here, and as some have mentioned in previous tributes, Mr. Fleischer had these very distinctive pencil marks that he made. I don't know, maybe he just didn't like sharpening his pencils, but here it is. I can show you. I hope you can see. This is Mr. Fleisher's marks. Short note to long note. He loved doing that. Phrase marks. I think we, his students, all have a cherished library of scores with Mr. Fleischer's lessons in them. So here's some Chopin.
Yael, you're really sending goosebumps. This was incredibly beautiful performance. I can't thank you enough.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, it's incredible. You mentioned the markings. Do you have any memory you'd like to share? Something about the markings? That was amazing score you shared with us.
Yes, I have so many. I wish I can share with you the entire library. um, I'm
That's a
thinking,
wealth.
yes, I'm thinking actually for some reason right now of the last movement, the variation movement of Beethoven's Opus 109. I think that many of us, maybe even many of the listeners at the moment, his former students, we've played this piece for him. And there was something about the timing in the first variation with those thick, like almost like a painting, pencil marks that I love so much. There's something in that gesture. It's not just the timing; it's the entire expression of that moment that is right there in that marking. It's amazing, and I'm very grateful to have so many scores like that. And even though I know many of us play with iPads these days, there's really no way to replace that touch of pencil instruction to paper. It's so wonderful.
This is wonderful. Do you feel like those markings mean something different as you grow as a musician yourself?
Do his markings mean something different to me over
Then,
the
yeah,
years?
when he actually marked your score from from that time.
I I don't always follow his markings. um, I think
That's
the
very genuine.
the markings I think the markings are a perfect um, expression of what he wanted in the music, and I don't think they've changed over the years. At least the years that I've worked with him in the '90s, and I imagine since then. Also, I think he had a very, very exact and specific way in which he heard music that was not subject to the passage of time.
Hmm.
There's a kind of, from him, I always sensed a kind of, as if there was a truth that was always valid and always the same. However, so I don't think that would have changed for him, and I imagine, as I mentioned, as with the example of Opus 109, because that was such a piece that was so close to him, I imagine that many of us have very similar markings in our scores, even though we as individuals probably played very differently.
Hmm.
And maybe we as individuals played differently now than we have when we studied it with him. So I think certainly that's the case for me. But for him, I feel that there was a certain kind of truth that stayed throughout the generations.
Interesting that you mentioned that, of course, every one of the artists who was nurtured by Leon Fleischer became an individual, remarkable artist. And
Yes,
that's what marks the great mentor and great teacher, nurturing the individuality of his students and
yes,
not
I
so much
think
imposing his own. He was teaching how to think and how to hear music,
right,
not how to execute it.
right. I think it's actually remarkable that and of course over the last few weeks, many of us have had wonderful communications, and it's been an incredible week. But I think it is remarkable how different we are from each other as musicians, even though I do believe that we heard the same lessons.
Yes.
um, and yet, it's exactly as you said. I think we have all internalized his teachings in different ways. We all related to his teachings and related to him, I think, in different ways. And each one of those ways created something really, really beautiful.
Yes, definitely beautiful and definitely very special. And I want to thank you very much for your beautiful playing, very, very heartfelt. It really did send goosebumps down my spine. I'm sure people felt that similarly.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for being with us. We will say goodbye to Yael and bye. And I'd like to introduce to our virtual stage Christie Peery Skousen. Welcome, Christie. Thank you for being with us. The stage is all yours.
Um, First, I want to offer my sincere condolences, blessings, and prayers to Mr. Fleischer's children, extended family, and dear wife, Kathy. I can only imagine the loss you are feeling, and I'm so, so sorry. Kathy, especially, is dear to my family. She was my younger brother's first piano teacher and gave him such a warm and welcome introduction to music. When I heard the news from a dear friend about Mr. Fleischer's passing last week, all breath literally left my body. It was as if someone had just punched me in the gut. I think it's fair to say that nobody looms as large in my musical consciousness as Leon Fleischer. I was 8 years old when I had my first lesson with him at the Peabody Conservatory in room 413. My mom, Irene Peery Fox, was getting her doctorate with him at the time, and she and I were scheduled to play at a national women's conference, and so she asked Mr. Fleischer if she could bring me in for a lesson, and he said yes. So I played Clementi Sonatina number 6 for Leon Fleisher, and there was a fermata in the last movement, and Mr. Fleischer told me that I had entire control of that fermata and I could hold it as long as I wanted to. And he said, look, if you even wanted to, you could go off stage and get a drink of water. It's totally your choice. And I just loved that. I talked about this newfound fermata power all of the time. This was my first taste of Mr. Fleischer's ability to help one see the magic in music. I have a strong competitive streak in me, and I spent my piano development years competing. Repertoire decisions, musical decisions, practicing decisions, all were focused on what was needed in order to win the next competition. So it was quite a shock to my system then to enter Mr. Fleischer's studio at the age of 18 and to have him ask me after my very first lesson to stop competing. And not stop for a semester or for a year, but for the entire 4 years I was planning on studying with him. It felt like that moment when Aladdin reaches out his hand to Jasmine and asks, do you trust me? And so I stepped off the golden, away from my familiar and secure castle, and stepped into the musical unknown with Mr. Fleischer as my guide. Even though it was terrifying at times, I can say without hesitation that the leap was worth it. Mr. Fleischer had this ability to take all of his students on a journey of musical understanding and connection that it's hard for me to describe in words. When he pulled up his chair next to you and started playing with you, it felt like a portal into another universe opened. Everything just started making sense. You could feel it when he played, and you could feel it when he spoke. He was a master of sound and a master of language. One of the things he said to me during one of my lessons keeps rattling around in my brain. He said, the opposite of everything I just told you is equally as true. This living with opposing truths and the ability to hold opposites at the same time has come up in my life again and again, in music, in relationships, in faith. Holding opposites is complex and uncomfortable for me, but when I'm brave enough to try, it gives me access to something greater, something deeper, and something ultimately more connecting. And so here I sit holding both immense pain and immense gratitude for the man who took music and changed me forever from the inside. Mr. Fleischer, it was an honor to know you and to be your student. I trust you, I miss you, and I'm forever grateful for you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Christie. I have a hard time speaking myself. Let me just compose myself for a second. This was an extraordinary touching, amazing sharing, amazing memories, incredible playing. Thank you so much for being with us today. We'll offer our stage now to Suzanne Newcomb. And Suzanne, welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you. And I really appreciate everyone's courage and readiness and willingness to get ready in such a short time. Thank you. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Can you hear me okay? I'm assuming
We
that
can hear you perfectly fine. Everything sounds
Wonderful.
beautiful.
The sound check was great, and thank you for doing this. And it's been such an interesting and emotional week since all of us found out about Mr. Fleischer's death, and I still call him Mr. Fleischer. Some of us do. I don't think I could ever call him Leon. I studied with him for my doctoral studies back in the 80s, finished up in 1990. I loved listening to some of the sentiments yesterday. I was at that Halloween party where we all had our costumes on, and Daniel Shapiro was dressed up as Mr. Fleischer. And Kevin, I don't think he mentioned, but he was Salome. He had his head on a platter, so we'll see if he remembers that, if that was the same party. Since I left, so that was basically a lifetime ago, I would see Mr. Fleischer whenever I could, whenever he was in the state of Ohio. I've been up to Cleveland to see him and down to Cincinnati, and the last time was in 2016, and it was the most memorable because I had my daughter with me who was working on her master's in piano performance, and he was so gracious to her. We snuck backstage. We just acted like we owned the place. And as soon as I saw him, I always said my name because I figured with 60 years of students, I didn't really expect him to remember who I was, even though he did. So it was just wonderful to see him perform and then have some of my own students go down there. And the following year, I got to see him in Baltimore, which was wonderful at the MTNA conference, and see his wonderful concert that he did with Catherine Jacobson, his wife. And so wholeheartedly give my condolences to his wife and family. I remember a wonderful home recital that we went to, and she had all this beautiful food and invited the studio to come hear him play on the 3rd floor of his house, which was not too far from my house in Baltimore, actually. And it just was a wonderful, magical night in this neighborhood where I lived too, in Roland Park. And being on the 3rd floor, all you could see outside was the leaves and the trees, and you just felt like you could have been anywhere, and hearing that beautiful music. I had actually been thinking about Mr. Fleisher even before I heard the news last Sunday, which, as Christine said, was quite a shock. Why were we all shocked? But we were. I played this minuet that I'm going to play in a few minutes at a recital a few weeks ago, socially distanced recital. Someone asked me to come play while they were all really far away, and I had touched on this minuet in the Sweet Bergamasque over the years. Nobody played the entire set as long as I was in Fleischer's studio, so I never heard what he had to say about it, but I certainly listened to his recording, and I thought it really contains the essence of things that I learned from him. The dance, the minuet, life is a dance, and at times you won't even hear the minuet. It's so hidden. About 2/3 of the way through the piece, you'll hear that it really just kind of takes off, and that is the anti-gravity part of it that I think was so important in his teachings. Most of what I learned over the 3.5 years that I was with him, I learned later, and he told us that. He said we were going to be able to rethink it and use everything, and of course the opposite being true, but it got us all thinking. As soon as I had my first lesson, he said, you're going to go out and you're going to buy a Sony Walkman, which is, for those of you who don't remember, a lot of us had them, a little portable cassette thing. So I have all my lessons on cassette, and I need to get those digitized. And haven't listened to them yet, but I had been listening to a few master classes just 2 weeks ago to help a student of mine with Opus 27 number 1. So it was just great to always be able to go back to everything I learned in my studies. It'd be really difficult to find a highlight of those years. I'm glad it's already been in the forefront of my mind, and I'm sure other highlights will come. But in my first lessons, I was working on Beethoven's First Concerto in C major. And when I reached the second movement lesson, which the lessons were sitting there for hours, as everybody remembers, while you watch everybody else, you get up, you start to play. And that's got its own value pedagogically, I guess, to be able to get up and play, but also really play from the heart and be thinking. But I was playing the second movement, and my accompanist had not shown up. So Mr. Fleischer sat down at the second piano and played the accompaniment with me. And it's a gorgeous slow movement in cut time, which seems counterintuitive, but I will never forget the feeling of that. And when we finished it, he said, you really get the feeling that that's the way it should be, even if next time it's something totally different. And that was just really an important teaching for me, is that whatever you're doing, when you're there, that's how it should be. And you're thinking, you are connected to every single note. Your mind should never try to be disengaged. That shouldn't be a goal. And I'm sure I'll think of more things as we continue. But for now, I'm going to put my earbuds down and play the Debussy Minuet from the Sweet Bergamasque. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. That, that was such a beautiful, beautiful presentation. And I loved every moment of the danciness in the air. And this was just so delightful to hear you play it with a feel of a dance. It's interesting that many students of Mr. Fleischer bring up the fact that to him, a lot of musical elements we're connected with a life, and you mentioned it just today by saying that life is a dance, and I believe you quoted Mr. Fleischer when you said that, right?
Yes.
So, what other connections between life and the music? Maybe you can bring up some other highlights from your memories.
Well, I remembered when watching Stefan play yesterday the Opus 109, and this is life, music, and everything when you play Opus 109. And I did have a quick story about that because I remember discussing with him right in the outer courtyard at Peabody that I was planning on playing 109 in the spring, and it was like September, and he said, you know, why do you think you can start learning that piece now and play it in the spring and be ready? And so being, 26 or whatever I was like, well, why not? Well, now I know. So he had always said that first variation, which Stefan did not play yesterday, and I was hoping he would, but it was a beautiful theme of that last movement. And he said that was a sort of dance as well. And we find dance in things where we don't expect them. That blew me away with that variation because I had never thought of it that way. Sure, it was in 3, but just like with this minuet, there are places where it's not in 3 at all. And I suppose it also goes back to the idea of gravity and physics. Yes, we have our up motion. We have our times when we are caught up in a swirl of something, and then there's nowhere to go but come back down. And that's probably how I would think that dance imitates life, but it's so essential in music, and I'm telling my students that all the time, even the ones who say, I don't sing and I don't dance. I'm like, well, we're going to start right here at the piano.
Well, piano does sing and dance, especially when Mr. Fleischer and his students play that instrument. It does it all, that's for
Absolutely.
sure. Thank you again for being with us and for sharing your wonderful memories. That's so enriching, so incredibly enriching to hear everybody's outpouring of their incredible stories and incredible lessons, both in music and life, which you carry with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anna, for doing this, and what a wonderful presentation for all of us. I've really enjoyed watching them,
Thank
and I'll
you.
keep watching.
And please stay with us at the end. I'm hoping maybe we can get all 4 presenters of today on stage one more time to thank the
Absolutely.
viewers. So please don't log off. And we will be moving at this time and present Mika Yui on stage. Welcome, Mika. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. It's a little bit unfair that I'm going forth after such 3 very emotional presentations. I just first wanted to say that normally I wouldn't jump at the chance at performing or speaking at a live streaming event like this. I'm actually very shy on social media, online, but as soon as I heard about this event, I jumped at the chance. I just really valued the opportunity to be with fellow Fleischer students and really bond during this very difficult time. And I really want to thank Anna so much for bringing us all together. This is such a beautiful tribute event that you've put together. So I was sitting last night at home trying to formulate my thoughts about what I can say about Mr. Fleischer today. And I was having such a difficult time, not because I didn't have anything to say, but I had so much in my head that I wanted to express, but I just didn't know how to formulate all those thoughts into something that I can properly speak about. So I decided that the best way to express myself was in the form of a letter to Mr. Fleischer. Here's my letter. Dear Mr. Fleischer, your passing has left me with such an indescribable depth of feeling that I never imagined I would have. I wish that I could be as eloquent and so good with words as you were, but here's my feeble attempt at expressing myself. I first met you when I was a student at the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto. You would come 6 times a year to give master classes to a select group of students. I tried very hard to comprehend your musical language, but having had come from a totally different school of playing, I believe I disappointed you. One class, I brought you the Liszt Wagner Liebestod, and you said, "Why are you bringing this to me?" After a few more classes, with me probably bringing you more inappropriate works, I was told by the dean that you no longer wanted to work with me because you didn't believe that I wanted to understand what you were trying to teach us. I was completely shocked and devastated. I asked to meet with you, and I remember bawling my eyes out in front of you. I don't think you expected that. I believe you took pity on me and so assigned me 2 pieces as a test. They were the Beethoven Opus 110 and Schubert Little A Major Sonata. I brought these pieces to you during your following visit. I actually don't think I played them all that great, but I did pass your test. I think you saw that I had tried really hard. 3 years later, and having gone through some major life changes, I ended up in Baltimore. I auditioned for you, I think as a different pianist, and I was ecstatic when you accepted me into your studio of 7 students. That was the year of your 70th birthday and the year we had the Brahms Marathon. Who can say besides the 7 of us that they got to sit in on Leon Fleisher teaching all of Brahms's solo piano works? That was a transformational year for me. Not only did I learn how to approach Brahms, I learned how to approach music. After I graduated from Peabody, I got married, to which you said, everybody should try that once. I lived in Baltimore several more years and saw you numerous times at both intimate and public functions along with your wife, Kathy. Of course, though you offered, I could never, ever call you Leon. As a matter of fact, I felt that I never was able to ever really look you in the eye and have a real conversation with you. I was always extremely nervous to be in your presence. In truth, I knew that you were actually very down to earth, but boy, you seemed almost like a god in my eyes. I know for a fact that many of your students felt as I did. And now that you have passed, you have now become even more elevated and godlike in my mind. I have now been teaching young people for several decades. I feel armed with great knowledge that I can pass down to my students. My students are lucky in that they get to hear valuable information I did not get to until much later in life. Though I do wonder if the things I try to teach them will affect them as much as you affected your students. You just had a way with words. I have a notebook full of basically everything that came out of your mouth. I often quote you in my lessons, but I don't think I'll ever be able to match the impact you had on us, sitting on that blue bouncy ball in room 413, short stubby pencil behind your ear, glasses on top of your head, eyes closed, sharing your wisdom, and saying things like, "Not everything you find is gold. Sometimes it's just," and we'd all be holding our breath, "dog poop." He used a different word. Thank you for everything you gave me, to us, and for everything you leave behind in this world. I imagine that you are now high on Mount Olympus with the Greek gods you often talked about, with 2 big lions sitting on either side of you, looking down on us. Rest in peace. Your forever student, Mika. A piece that has been very close to my heart is the Brahms D minor piano concerto. It's been special to me supposedly since in utero because it was a work that my mother heard while she was pregnant with me. One of my big highlights while studying with Mr. Fleisher was when he accompanied me. We played through the entire concerto, and that was just such a thrilling experience for me. I would take Leon Fleisher accompany me over Zell in Cleveland any day. And that was also a moment I realized that Mr. Fleisher had so much music inside of him that though his right hand, his right fingers were not fully functioning, wow, the sounds he made, he was able to produce anything he wanted to. And I really thought this man could make music just with 2 sticks. So by no means can I do this work justice, but I wanted to play just the cadenza from the first movement. This piece for me represents Mr. Fleischer. It's noble and heroic, broad, beautiful, and transformational.
Thank you very much. Mika, that was beautiful, beautiful presentation, and what a wonderful story of your interactions and your relationship with Mr. Fleischer. Incredible how you earned his trust, you earned his belief in you. And Mr. Fleischer was probably one of the people who understood the change, the effort, the growth, and looking for gold and sometimes not finding it quite, right?
Yeah, I could probably proudly say that I might be his only student he ever fired at one point. Yeah, but now that I'm older and I have students and I'm a mother of a young child, I just understand his intentions much, much better and at a deeper level. And it's strange with his passing. I guess it's like when a parent passes away, you don't fully appreciate everything while they're living, but now that he's gone, it's just his presence is just with me. And I'm currently teaching in a 2-week piano seminar, and his voice is inside my head as I'm teaching.
Of course, as it is in ours, in everybody who familiar with Mr. Fleischer, whether closer or maybe not so close as you were, still his teaching, his story of his life, his approach to life, to people, and to music resonates with everybody's heart as noble, pure, sincere, and very dedicated.
And
This
just
is
to
incredible.
clarify, I felt close to him, but it feels a little bit like I was a middle school girl looking up at a boy had a crush on. I don't think he fully comprehended how much he meant to me, because as I expressed in my letter, he always intimidated me a little bit, but I'm just full of gratitude for everything that he gave me.
Thank you very, very much for your beautiful sharing and for offering your gorgeous playing to everyone. And please stay on. We would like to invite back our participants today, the 4 beautiful ladies who carry on Mr. Fleischer's teaching and his impact on every person who came close to him and every musician who lives in our time. Welcome one more time, Yael Weiss. I'm sorry, I'm bad at pronouncing names. Christie, Peery Skousen, Suzanne Newcomb, and Mika. It was an incredible journey to have you with us today, and I'm sure this helps us not only remember but carry on the incredible energy and wisdom and depth of Mr. Fleischer's teaching.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you so much, Anna, for bringing us all together, this particular wonderful group and all the groups that are performing every day this week. It's been an incredible journey.
Thank you all, and we will finish the program today with again admiring, appreciating, and enjoying Mr. Fleischer's own playing. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back again tomorrow at 1, on Tuesday at 1, and on Wednesday at 1, as we'll share more of our testimonies and beautiful playing of Mr. Fleischer's wonderful students. Bye.